James today, and we're gonna make a tape of John and Mary Jean's time in the Navy. And we're gonna start off with John's record. We just finished off a mighty good meal that James prepared here. And John, if you want to just start back, tell us when you were born and just take it from there, and we'll just carry on a conversation here more or less.
All right, well, I go back to the Depression years, the year 1926. On June the 15th, I came into this world down across from the old Birch homestead there in between Inman and Woolsey. I don't remember living there when I was first born and all. The first I have a memory of is after we moved to Fayetteville, and then when we moved back to the country, and I was in the first grade in Fayette County Grammar School, and that was my first recollection of the country. I don't remember visiting Grandma and Grandpa Birch there hardly at all. Of course, Granny was, she died the year that I was born. So my memory of the country is after we moved back and both Grandma and Granny had gone on. I went to the grammar school there in Fayetteville all the way through. The schoolhouse burned down when I was in the 6th grade, I believe it was, and we had to go to school down there in the community house. We call it the old log house. And but we finally got it built back, and I had the 7th grade in the regular school, and then of course finished there in Fayette County High School in 1943. And 1943 was right in the middle of the military war with both Japan and Germany, and the time came for me to decide what I wanted to do in regard to the military service. And I had just gotten out of high school the year before. I knew that the draft was going to get me pretty soon, and my brother Iris had been drafted, had gone into the infantry, and he had had a pretty miserable assignments for the first year. And I decided that I didn't know whether I wanted to be drafted in the Army or not. And about that time, Mary Jean came home on military leave from her assignments, and she told me what a good time I'd have in the Navy. So Mary Jean went out, and I joined the Navy in 1944, May of 1944.
And you joined along with?
Yeah. There was 3 of us, Tit Brown and Jim Birch, my first cousin, and myself. We were all going through the same throes of what to do about the draft, because we were all turning 18 in the month of June. And we all 3 went down and talked to the Navy folks, and we all 3 joined. And within a week, they had us all signed up and ready to go to our boot camp assignment there in Camp Perry, Virginia. Now that's right outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. It's there on the James River, and the camp was built along the James River. And we had a period of 3 months there, and that was the basic training, they called it at that time, a boot camp. And when we got through with that, they gave us 2 weeks leave of absence to go down to our homes and be there for 2 weeks, and then report back for further duty. I well remember that 2 weeks.
You came into the terminal station on that leave, didn't you?
Yeah, I always
in
traveled.
Atlanta?
Yeah, I traveled by train the whole time I was at Camp Perry. There was a train that would go across from Camp Perry over to about halfway in Virginia. I believe it was Petersburg, Virginia, and then we could catch the main line going south from Washington to Atlanta on the Southern Railway. And that's the way I got home. I'd go halfway across the state of Virginia and then change trains and go down. The little train going across there was a little milk train, and it stopped at every crossroads and picked up milk and carried it in.
Into the next
And
one.
it was a slow process, but it beat the Greyhound bus.
Yeah.
But while I was home on leave that 2 weeks, we had met some boys from Dallas, Georgia, and we'd made friendship with them. And they invited us to come up to see them, and when we did, Aline, Gray's wife, was back there in Dallas. Gray had been sent overseas, and she had come back, and she was pregnant when she got home and so forth. And it was during that 2 weeks that little Glenn Gray Jr. was born. He was born at Fort Mac, and that was one of the highlights of my visit home, was to go see them there at Fort Mac.
She was living with Catherine and Price Kincaid, wasn't she, at that time?
I don't remember who she was living with. Her mother was alive then and had a home. And I don't remember whether she was living with
Her mother.
her mother or with Catherine, or it might have been a joint deal. I don't remember. But I just remember seeing her there in the hospital at Fort Mac. I didn't visit her when I was in Dallas, but I found out about her because all of them knew her.
Yeah.
And knew Gray. Because he had been county agent there, you know, before they had been married and all, and before he went in service. And when the 2 weeks was up, we got back to Camp Perry, Virginia, and each of us was going to receive orders to go to our assigned place to serve. And I got back and found my name on an amphibian group that was going to be made up and sent to California for brief training, and then we'd go aboard this what they call a LST. It's a landing craft that went up to the beach and let the door down, and you had to run to the beach. And we were out processing that morning, and the chief came out and said, I need somebody that can type up these outgoing orders here. Says, can anybody type? And oh me, I just finished business school, and I thought, well, I'll just volunteer for that. So I said, well, I can do a little typing, chief. And he says, well, come on in here. So I went in and typed up the orders to transfer us to California. And he kept watching me. And I got through, and then he came over there and he says, is your name on that list? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, scratch through it. And I don't know whether he shorted that list or whether he got another person to go, but he had authority to do whatever he had to do. And that group of men went out, and I don't know how many of them got back, because they did go over and they served in that landing craft boat. And I never did hear from any of them that was on that list again, because Tit Brown, he went to a training school, and Jim went to a gunner's mate school in Florida. And he was lucky. He got an assignment there, and he stayed there in that Florida assignment his entire career. He was very lucky. And the old chief took a liking to me, and he said, well, I need somebody to do this on a regular basis. Says, would you like to just temporarily be my clerk here? I says, yes, sir. Of course, they call us yeoman. So I stayed with him from September then until around the March of '45. And I guess he could see that the writing on the wall, how things were going in the different areas and all. And one day this order came in to send somebody to New York to be aboard a troop transport. And he came in and he said, "John, I think this would be a good assignment for you." And it was the storekeeper second class. And there I sat. He had promoted me up to a seaman first class. Of course, you go in as a apprentice, and then you're a seaman second class and a seaman first class. So I had started a few promotions, but he says, "I'll promote you up to a storekeeper second class." Well, that was unheard of in those days, to go up 2 grades at one time, because I skipped storekeeper third class. But he wanted me to fill this assignment, and it was a one-man party, just one person to lead. So he fixed me all up on that and gave me orders to report to landing craft APP 177. That's a troop transport, and it was a German ship, a luxury ship that they had taken and converted into a troop transport. And it was docked there in New York at Pier 92. That was a big, long pier, and they handled all the big ships out of there. That's where the Queen Mary docked right up and down from there. It's in Lower Manhattan. And during the time that I was there, we shuttled back and forth from New York to Southampton, England. And I can't remember how many trips we made, but we were just continually going and coming and going and coming. And sometimes we'd have to wait because they had to assemble troops on each end, and our ship would carry about between 6,000 and 7,000 men at a time. So it took a few, getting together to get that many, and of course the supplies to go with them and all. So usually when we were in New York, we were there anywhere from a week to sometimes as much as 2 weeks, getting the troops on and all the
loaded up,
materials and everything. And that was our schedule, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. During that time, one thing that I definitely remember, one of my responsibilities on board ship, in addition to being storekeeper, I had to stand watch on the bridge out on the side. They had a 24-hour watch, a man on the right side and one on the left side of the bridge, out in the open with the winds and rains and whatever hit you. And you stood 4-hour shifts. And one night we had this storm. I've never seen such a storm as all my life. Our boat was a big boat, and that thing was going down, and the waves were coming up over the front of that thing, and when you'd go down, you'd think, well, that's going off the end of the world. But then it would come back up, and it looked like the other way, and as you went down, those propellers would come out in the back and just shake that whole boat as big as it was. And that was pretty frightening.
I had that same feeling going across.
Yeah.
We had a bad storm first night out.
Yeah.
And I'd stand up on the bow of that thing, and one minute you'd be way up in there, and the next minute you'd be down water level.
Yeah.
That thing was just riding up and down, and every time the prop would come out, it'd make a boom, 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 boom noise.
Yeah. And it was frightening because our boat was being tossed around, and also with us, pretty close by, was the aircraft carrier Enterprise. And that storm was so bad that it came up and hit that flight deck and knocked that whole flight deck off. And Enterprise had to turn around and go back to the States because of the bad weather. And they had to stay in, I think, pretty close to a year getting that flight deck put back together.
Put back on.
Mm-hmm. It was a bad storm. And I was glad to get that trip out. But also during that trip, and while I was there, coming and going in New York, Mary Jean got transferred up in the Postal Service. And she and I had some good times there in New York. Well, I went up in March, and I think she came a few months later. But, of course, Mary Jean being there all the time, she'd go down to the USO and get all these tickets because she would know about when I was going to be back. And if she couldn't use, she'd get whatever tickets were available. And if I was there, we went together. If it wasn't there, she'd get a friend or give them to some friends. But they got to know the USO people pretty good, and I think they probably realized Mary Jean's situation to be with me and all. So we had a lot of good evenings and all. Mary Jean was billeted there right in downtown Manhattan. And she was there about, I reckon, a year and a half, maybe, not too long. But she worked hard, but she was in the APO section where all those APOs come in, and they had to be just like a post office and handle all the mail the whole time. But we had some great times and saw a lot of good shows and interesting entertainment. We went a lot to Radio Music Hall, and a lot of the other theaters always gave extra tickets or some tickets of each show, you know. USO did a great job for the military, sure did. On my last trip on that troop transport, it was after the war, and the war was over in August in Europe. And we were going over in December. And they decided that rather than stopping at Southampton, they were going to send us on up to Bremerhaven, Germany. And that would be the first trip that we had to really the war area. And we went up through the English Channel and down through the North Sea into Bremerhaven. And I never will forget that trip because I was on duty again up to watch what was on my side of the ship. And we had 7 of these minesweepers in front of us, 1 directly in the front and 3 on each side and going down because, see, they had mined that whole area, the North Sea, going down. And we had to be sure that we didn't hit anything because we carried a lot more water, carried a lot more depth of water than most of the military ships did, especially the cruisers and the smaller ships. So we had to have the minesweepers to go, and 2 of them did hit mines, and it was all a little scary, but no damage was done to anybody. They were able to detect them and blow them up and all. And that was the nearest thing I ever got to being endangered that I knew of. We never did travel in a convoy because we could go so much faster than the Liberty ships and things like that. So the only time we knew that if we were in contact or in danger was when the ship would go on a zigzag course. And we did that quite often, but I never did know whether they really saw it or just thought they did. Or
suspicion of some being in that area.
Yeah, or they had reports or something. But they had good communications, and I guess that's what saved us from one of the submarines ever finding us. So if they found us, they wasn't able to hit us. But I never did know if they shot at us, whether they were there or not. But when we got to Bremerhaven, they didn't have anybody for us to bring home, at least enough for them to sail. And so the captain asked, had anybody had any liberty lately? And of course none of us had. And he says, well, I'm going to let a group of about 70 or 80 of you go up to Copenhagen, Denmark. He says, if any of you got any money to go that far? He got us a group, and I was one of them, and he put us on a train there in Bremerhaven, and we went up to Copenhagen, and we spent our time up there. But while we were there, our lead man got a telegram from him and said that the ship had been ordered to leave Bremerhaven and go back to the States, and that for us to report to the local Navy depot when we returned. So they let us stay out 2 weeks, and then when we got back, we reported to the Navy depot there right next to where we had been docked.
You felt like you lost your home, didn't you?
I had lost everything except I found my sea bags. I had 2 sea bags, and they were full of my stuff. Of course, being a storekeeper, they decided that they needed me there at that Navy supply depot, and all of the electricians and everybody else, they got orders, and they caught boats and airplanes and caught a little bit of any way they could get out of that place. Some of them were just shipped over to England, but anyway, all except about 3 of us got new orders. But I stayed there in the supply depot in Bremerhaven from January until May of 1946. At that time, I had gotten enough points to qualify for a discharge, and that was my ticket to come home. Now the Navy, they didn't want to lose anybody, and they must have spent 3 days talking to me and talking about all the advantages of re-enlisting into the Navy. And I guess if Mary Jean had been there to talk to me, I would probably have had a career in the Navy. But she wasn't there, and I couldn't contact her, so as a result, I told them no. But to show you how bad they wanted you to stay, they offered me a chief's rating if I would stay. Now, I was a storekeeper 2nd class, and I was going all the way to chief. It was very inviting and very tempting for a young boy, just 19 years of age, being made a chief. But they were really wanting people to enlist and stay. Of course, I felt like I had always done them a good job, and they wanted to keep good people. They wanted to keep good people. But I got a Liberty ship, one of these little bathtub types, and they put me aboard that with a whole bunch of other people rejoicing that they were going to get to go home. And we made the trip in about 14 days back to New York. And that was one of the most miserable trips that I ever had in the Navy, bar none. But arrived back in New York, very close to Pier 92, and they put me on a train and gave me a ticket with orders to report to the Jacksonville, Florida discharge area. And I went down there and stayed, I can't remember exactly how long, maybe a couple of weeks. And during that period of time, they processed us and inspected us and everything. And I was discharged on June the 15th, 1946, and that was my 20th birthday. I got out of service
on your birthday.
On my birthday, 1946. And I served some 26 months and so many days, and that made me eligible for 3 years of GI Bill training. And I came back and utilized every day of that and got my degree from first with Berry for 2 years, and then a year and 2 summers, one regular session and 2 summers at Georgia, and I finished in 3 years. 1949.
Is that right?
August of 49.
I didn't remember that you just took 3 years to finish.
Yeah, I went through in 3 years by going every summer. I didn't get much my first summer because Berry didn't offer much, and I knew then that I had to transfer from Berry back. At Berry the first year, I got in. It's the only place I could get into school was Berry, and I got in there strictly because Irish Bub was there. He had returned. He got back just a few months before I did, maybe just a few weeks before I did. And he had already made arrangements to go back to Berry. And then he called up there, contacted somebody and told them that I'd like to come with him. And so they gave him permission for me to come and go to Berry. And we went back to Berry, and we roomed together as roommates the first year. that we were back from service. And then the next year, Olab, he was looking for a school, so he came to Berry, and we were roommates the second year I was there.
Well, wait a minute now, John. You and I started in at the same time.
You was there the first year I was
Yeah,
there?
I roomed with Travis Hardy down the hall,
Okay.
and then he went home after the first semester, and I moved in with you and Iris.
Okay. I didn't remember. I never
Yeah.
did remember living with the three of us.
Yeah.
But you lived with me the second year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe Iris left first,
Yeah, he left after 1 year.
and then you left later.
I left the second year.
And old Philip Dandridge, I started rooming with him from South Carolina
Uh-huh.
then, after you left.
Okay.
Yeah, but you and I started together because I remember us taking those placement tests in math and English,
Yeah.
and I failed my math. And I had to take first year
Go ahead.
some kind of, make up math course before I could take college algebra.
Oh, yeah.
But you passed everything. So you got ahead of me that way. I
Well-
passed the English, but I didn't pass the math.
Uh-huh. Well, I thought you came.
I graduated in
later.
'46, see, and you came back about that time.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I had applied to go to Berry, I think.
Mhm.
Somehow or
Been
another. I don't really remember how I got in there, other than I went with you and Iris up there.
Well, I didn't remember all three of us being there, but I remember
Yeah.
being with Bub because he had malaria.
Yeah,
And I remember how sick he'd get with that malaria, and it would just scare me to death when he'd come down with that stuff and just shake. But he
Yeah.
would take that quinine and eventually get over it.
he and I slept on the same double-decker bunk bed. I slept on top, and he was sleeping on the bottom.
Yeah.
And when he'd have those chills, he'd just shake the whole bed. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, he took that medicine for years, I think. I believe they gave him a little bit of a, what do you call it, not a pension, but disability payment. It wasn't much, just enough to pay for his medicine, more or less, I think.
I don't remember him ever getting a dime, but he may have.
I think he did get it for a few years. He got a little bit of allotment for that.
Well, if he got anything other than the little stipends from the GI Bill,
Yeah,
was the only thing he got that I knew of.
yeah.
And I got a little check every month.
Yeah, I remember that because that was about my only source of money. It's what you and Iris gave me.
Well, we enjoyed all of it, and it was a good time, and give us a chance to get to know each other better as brothers after all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, those were some good days.
That about takes care of my military service. It was very interesting. I met a lot of interesting folks, but kept up over the years with a goodly number of my shipmates and people there at Camp Perry. But over the years, I've lost contact with every one of them, even Tit Brown. I don't know where he is or what's ever happened to him.
I'm not sure what it.
I know where Jim is.
Yeah. Jim's still alive and kicking in spite of his recent problems.
Right.
Let's see, John. If we can get a close-up of some of those pictures. If you have a picture of you anywhere there.
No, I don't. It's all
Okay,
downstairs.
all right. Well, we'll just get that downstairs then.
All right.
And
I have a picture of my ship, the AP-177, and then a picture of my boot camp group. They at Camp Perry, and then a picture of my discharge.
okay, well, we'll just cut off here now for a minute then, and go down there and take a look at those.
Okay?
Okay. That's the Camp Perry, Virginia group. John, see if you can point out where you are on that. Let's see if I can get up a little closer.
All right.
here.
There I am right there.
And you said old Jim was right
And
over
there's
here.
old Jim right there. He made the front row. And Tit Brown was right next to him.
Uh-huh. About how many is that, Ray?
I think it's 150. Was considered a
Company?
company, yeah.
Uh-huh. That's a
And
pretty...
that's the old chief that I worked for. He was our chief in the training, and then he was chief of the outgoing unit too.
Uh-huh. And
He
let
was
me-
an old CB chief. He was a construction man. He was a nice fella.
Well, let me get this picture of you up here. Let's
That's
see
in
the-
Madras Blues.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll get the where the light don't shine. Yeah, that's good. You look like a kid there almost, John.
I was.
That's
The
good.
folks talk nowadays about my grandson Brian. Says, "Oh, I worry about him. He's 18, you know." And I says, "Well, by then I'd been halfway across the world.
Yeah.
Didn't know a soul."
And this is your discharge here.
That's my official discharge from the United States Navy.
Uh-huh. I never did get around to framing mine.
Well, Joe did that for me. Joe thinks everything ought to be framed, and I had it in a drawer, all of that rolled up. Mama saved it all for me over the years. She had it all rolled up for me for many, many years.
I was trying to get that date. I don't know if I could get it on the film.
1946.
Uh-huh. And this is your ship right down here. And that was the name of the ship was the USS Europa,
Uh-huh.
and your number was
AP 177.
well, it sort of dwarfs them tugboats, doesn't it?
Yep. Because they only have one stack going, that's just to be in the harbor. And here's the bridge right up here. And there's a little stand on each side. And that was how high I
That
was
was where
above
you-
the water to
Did your
observe.
guard duty?
That's I did my guard duty. Everybody had to pull a duty.
Yeah.
That was the Navy way of doing it. Everybody had to carry the load.
And they gave that ship back to Germany after the war, I believe, didn't they?
They sold it to somebody in France, and it was eventually scuttled. It never was back in service again.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Tell you, after those military folks got through with it, there wasn't much
There
left.
wasn't much left of it.
Wasn't much left.
Okay.
All right. That's
And
about
you
all I
spent
got
your-
down here.
All your working days with Gulf Oil Corporation
That's
after
right.
that.
The old orange
And we
disc.
have the memorabilia here on a lot of those days. Let's see.
Well, this is sort of the military over here. I mean, this is my working days. That's a picture that hung in my boss's office. Everett Milliken, he was a big politician in Georgia, and he was our boss for many years.
Uh-huh.
He gave me that when he retired.
And that over there is,
Yard of the month when I was in Houston.
oh, John the Gardener.
Right.
Oh, you've had some mighty pretty yards, and you
Yeah.
still got one here.
That is serving on the Petroleum Council of Georgia. Gave me a certificate.
Uh-huh. 10th day of December, 62.
That's right. Just before I went to Chattanooga.
Uh-huh.
This is a birch emblem that Glenn Gray painted for me. You know, Glenn Gray was a good artist when he was young, and he did that arms thing for us.
Yeah, I still have the coat of arms that Mary Jean gave us.
Uh-huh. I think ours is upstairs, too. This is Mary Jean's clock that she had in her home until...
She came back to Georgia.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's about all.
Certificate of award. What's that one down there? Another Guff Award, huh?
That's about the 30-year award. Worked for them 30 years. Actually, I retired in 32 years. But that was my 30th award. They give them to you every 5 years.
Uh-huh. And this is a
Retirement picture.
retirement picture. Yeah.
Denoting all the cities I had worked in and so forth, and all the immediate people that worked with me there signed me off.
And showing up your gardening talents.
Right.
That's good. And there's your calling cards on the wall.
Calling cards, and Jane painted the little station in the middle.
Yeah, that looks
That's a
kind of like
Texas-
the one that,
That's a Texas station, typical of rural Texas.
uh-huh. What does that sign say up there, 16 cents?
Either 12.9 or 16.9. That was a good numbers.
And this is John's hangout down here. This is where he takes his afternoon naps. Let me broaden this out a little bit here where we can get that long sofa.
That's my brother Gray painted that.
Yeah.
He painted us all a picture, I think, at least he did me.
Yeah, we got one. It wasn't that large a picture, but we still have it somewhere.
I've enjoyed it over the years.
Mayor moves pictures about so that it's hard to know where anything is around the house anymore. Okay, we finished with John's Navy service, so now we're going to do Mary Jean's. He's kind enough to bear with me on this, and so we're going to see if we can get most of the highlights of her career in. So John, if you want to just start off with when she came into this world, we'll go from there.
All right. Mary Jean was born on June the 18th, 1922. She's born in Fayette County, Georgia, down between Inman and Wolsey. And Mary Jean was the oldest of the girls, and she was the oldest child of
Our mother.
our mother, Verna Roberts Birch. She grew up between those years and attended Fayette Grammar School and high school. Mary Jean was the smartest one in the Birch family by far, and she was the valedictorian of her graduating class. Mary Jean went from there to Young Harris College. She was there for 2 years and made quite a name for herself up in the hill country, I'll call it, because I remember carrying her to school up there, and we'd come around those mountains, and Daddy never did know whether his brakes were going to work or whether they weren't going to work. And it was an exciting trip to carry Mary Jean either way, going over Neal's Gap to Young Harris College. After 2 years there, she transferred to the University of Georgia and got her degree there in Bachelor of Science of Home Economics and Education. Mary Jean finished there in 1943. She had a sad experience with her practice teaching. They assigned her to a high school down in Baxley, Georgia, way south Georgia. And evidently, she didn't understand those kids, and I know she did. They didn't understand her probably. But anyway, when she got home from that experience down there, she announced that she'd never teach school as long as she lived. So after all of her education, she had to start looking for other careers. She worked for a short time as a dietitian out at the old Bell Bomber plant in Marietta. She wasn't too happy with the job out there, and one day she and one of her friends from Atlanta were commiserating with each other that they were unhappy with their work, and they decided that they'd go down and talk to the Navy people about joining the Navy. This was in 1943, right in the thick of the both world wars. I mean, both war with Japan and Germany. Excuse me. They both decided that they were going to join, and so they signed up to become Navy career people. Unfortunately, when Mary Jean took her medical exam to go into the Navy, they decided that her eyesight was so that she could not serve as a commissioned officer. And so they offered her just a regular recruit as a apprentice seaman. I'm gonna have to stop a minute.
Yeah, okay. Okay. She just enlisted in the Navy.
She just enlisted in the Navy and did make the commissioned officers. I always felt that they were not fair to Mary Jean in that respect. But she did not let it get her down. She went ahead and took the opportunity of serving her country. They assigned her to recruit training, which is boot camp, at Hunter College in Bronx, New York. And that was for about a 2 or 3 month period. And then she went to the U.S. Navy Postal School. That was her second assignment. And she stayed there for about 2 to 3 months. And then she became a full-fledged Navy mail clerk. Back then, most of the mail went APO and such as that, and each branch of the service was required to handle their own mail. So this was the responsibility of that group. She went to Milledgeville, Georgia, and she served there about a year. Then from there she went to the Fleet Post Office in New York City. And there she worked with the APO. That's all the mail going out to the foreign countries. And it was all flown out of New York when possible, or put on boats, which a lot of them left from New York. And it was during her assignment there from May 1945 to February 1946 That's about 2 years that she was there in the Fleet Post Office. And that was the time that I was assigned there too. So we had a lot of good times in New York. I didn't have a lot of time to spend, but when I was on Liberty, Mary Jean always had an interesting assignment for me. Mary Jean was transferred around to many places. She went to San Francisco in 1946. And then in 1950, she got her first overseas assignment to Pearl Harbor. And by then she had become an accomplished cryptographer. That's one who codes and decodes messages. She served a full 4 years, which is considered a tour in the Navy. In 1953, she came back to the Patuxent River, Maryland, and she was the lead chief commander there in that center. And it was again for more aircraft than anything else at that particular time. And then while she was there, they decided that she needed to go to London. So she left there from Maryland, arrived in London in '56, again as one of the lead cryptographers. Then in 1958, she was transferred back to Norfolk, Virginia to, I suppose, learn a little bit about officer's candidate, because it was in the year '58 that she served in Bainbridge as a company commander in her OCS, Officers Training Center. And she became an officer's candidate. By then she had already been in the regular Navy for 10 years. And the other Navy, Reserve Navy, for about 5 years. So after 15 years in non-commissioned, she became a commissioned officer. And she was transferred then back to Norfolk to serve in the communication center there. And then in 1963, she went back to Pearl Harbor. And I believe that that was the period of time that the Korean War was going on, and there was an awful lot of work to be done in that area. In 1963, she returned to Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and that gave her more schooling and experience in all phases of communications and the support. They had to learn about the weather and training and all things like that, make a full rounded officer. And then in 1996, she was transferred to Bainbridge, Maryland, and she was a staff administrative personnel officer.
Well, I believe it. What was the date on that? You said 96. You know,
1966.
66.
1966.
Yeah.
She was a staff administrative personnel officer, and that's where they train approximately 2,400 enlisted women recruits every year. So that was quite a responsible job.
That's where she got to know Captain Ducey. I believe Captain Ducey, Ann Ducey was I believe she was the top officer at that training
At
facility.
Bainbridge, yes, I think so.
That's how they,
I never did meet her personally.
I never met her, but I've talked to her on the phone several times, and she wrote us some letters, you know, during Mary Jean's illness.
Yeah.
But she kept in touch right up to the end.
Mhm. And on March the 1st, 1972, she was promoted to the rank of commander. And she was assigned to the North Island Navy base there in Coronado, California. She
Oh.
had a,
Let me take a picture of this, hold that picture up sort of in front of you. Yeah, now I don't have to move the camera, John. That's a picture of Mama and Mary Jean when she got her commander's rating. Mama was there in California living with her at that time on Coronado Island. Okay.
this is a picture of that same celebration of her being a commander. That's the birthday cake that she had.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And this is also a picture of her two captains that were above her at that particular time. One was her boss, the fella, and the lady was her friend and captain.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And this is a picture of Mary Jean being piped aboard as a commander. That's her first time of coming on as a commander and her first official visit among the troops, we'll call it.
Uh-huh.
And this is her inspecting the troops on her first time as a commander. She knew how to look 'em over. And they knew how to stand at attention also. But that was quite a celebration for her, and it meant a lot to Mary Jean to have Mama there to witness it.
Right. Yeah.
In Mary Jean's career, so much of it was so far away that none of us were able to ever be there with her and enjoy many of the things that she accomplished and was awarded recognition for and such.
I believe that Mom and Daddy and didn't Aunt Sadie go with them up to visit her one time in Bainbridge, in Maryland?
They went to Patuxent River. That's where
Is that
she
where
had
she
the
was?
trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Mary Jean had the trailer there at the Patuxent River base.
Uh-huh.
And it was in an adjoining area just off from the base. And Mary Jean bought her a trailer, and she lived in that trailer the whole time. She's what they call off-campus, off-base billet.
Yeah.
And but that's where Aunt Sadie and Mom and Daddy went and visited one time. And to my knowledge, that's about the only visit. I made one trip to the West Coast with her. When she bought her first car, she came home and she bought her car, and on the basis of Daddy letting her drive that back to California, I had to ride with her.
Was
So-
that 54 Oldsmobile?
Yeah, yeah,
Blue one? Blue hardtop?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
And we drove all the way back, drove it in 4 days. We drove night and day, I think, except for maybe 2 nights we might have stopped. But that was a fast and furious trip. It was at Christmas time. I was coming home from Bear Schools, and I was out of Bear Schools for a period of time. Now, that had to be earlier than that. It had to have been in 47 or 48.
It might have been a different car I'm thinking about.
No, it was her first car that she ever owned.
Uh-huh.
It was a 47 or 48 car. But it was a nice car.
Yeah.
But Mary Jean was always in these foreign places, but she had a wonderful career. And then on February the 28th, 1974, she retired after some 32 years in the Navy.
And she continued living on their own Coronado in her home until 88, I believe it was,
Right.
when she got sick.
And mothers continued to live with her those years, and it was happy years. And many of us had the privilege of going out and visiting with her there on the island. Mm-hmm. She had a beautiful little home there, and we were always welcomed, and we always were shown a good time when we did get a chance to see her.
I remember Gray was telling about one time he and Eileen were out there, and Mary Jean had made reservations for them at a restaurant, and when they called them to tell them that the table was ready, the maitre d' or whoever it was told Gray, said, "Commander, your table's ready, sir." And Gray said, "That's the commander over there." Oh, man. But those, when I was out there with her during the time she was in the hospital there on Coronado, there was 2 aircraft carriers tied up there, and you could hear the speaker system from her front yard. You know, she was still that close to Navy.
Yeah.
And she loved every minute of it. John, if you hold those medals up there, we'll see if we can get a little glimpse of them. So far as I know, that's most of them. The larger ones, let's see. Yeah, that ought to be good there. And then the meritorious service one, let's see. Up a little bit higher, John. There you go. Thank you. Well, I know she was proud of that one because she had to establish herself at every new base she went to, and she went to a lot of them, as we've heard. That's good, John. Thank you. Let me get this focused back a little bit further. Thank you. All right.
Mary Jean may have had many boyfriends, and I'm sure she did, but I had the privilege of meeting one when I went to California with her to get her first car back out there. And he was a young man, and we had dinner with him the night that I was there, and she seemed to be very crazy about him, and he did her. But I don't know whatever happened. I never did ask Mary Jean about him, and she never did tell me about him after introducing him that one night out there. But I didn't stay in California but one day, and I caught the plane out the next morning because I had to get back to school.
Do you remember his name?
No, I don't remember his name. I can almost see his face. He was a nice looking young man. He was about Mary Jean's age.
Well, you know, Bob, I think she may have dated him some. Jane Fitzgerald's Bob. You know, she planned Jane's wedding when she and Bob got married. Mary Jean planned all that.
Yeah.
And had it all set up for them. And I guess you probably have read the letter that Mary Jean wrote Jane's mother, telling her all about the wedding and everything. So Mary Jean was really a friend to a lot of people and did a lot of mighty fine things.
She was a friend to everyone she met, and certainly a friend to our family, and she cared for us in many, many, many ways. And she was always sort of my confidant in not only growing up, but after I got old.
Yeah. And the fact that she could have had so much more for herself in the way of material things if she had wanted them. But she just lived to help others. I think about that old refrigerator that you had to defrost. She never had a frost-free refrigerator that
Yeah,
I know of. The one that she had there at the last was a pain to defrost.
she lived very frugally for herself, but was very generous to
To
all
the
who
family.
she came into contact with, and
I remember the time she sent me money to buy Eva a car when Eva was without a car one time,
yeah,
and she's helped a lot of people.
she saw some of us through college with an education too,
Yeah,
and all of the nieces and nephews appreciated it, and I always look forward to having a letter from her.
yeah.
Because they knew they had a check.
Okay. Well, just for the record, after Mary Jean had her stroke, she lived the last, I guess, close to 11 years, wasn't it, at Christian City
Right.
before she passed away. Do I have that date? It was March the
Third.
3rd of 99. And she had her funeral with the full military honors there at Inman. She's buried at the Inman Methodist Cemetery, along with our mother and father. Is there anything else you want to add to it, John?
I don't know anything other than that she was a wonderful sister.
Okay, well, let's see what these girls are doing in here now.
Let me count this, let's count the students. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126,
her picture.
So sorry.
No, no, you.
Older brothers were serving in the military. One was a B-52 bomber pilot flying combat missions in the South Pacific theater. Another was serving in the North Africa campaign and then Sicily, Italy, and France. One was serving on a troop ship back and forth across the North Atlantic, and another was serving in the South Pacific theater under General MacArthur. Eventually, all of her brothers were in the service. Mary Jean did her practice teaching, but she must have been influenced by her brother's service to the country, because she left the classroom and visited an Army recruiter. He offered her a commission, but a friend had joined the Navy. And Mary Jean enlisted in the waves as an apprentice seaman. That's pretty near the bottom. It did not take the Navy long to recognize her intelligence, her ability to develop logical conclusions, her sense of duty to country and another. She was soon placed in responsible positions, and by 1946 had worked her way up to Chief Petty Officer. She was stationed from Pearl Harbor as a cryptographer, decoding and encoding messages. during the Korean War, and in London as a cryptographer during the tense days of Lebanon, Cyprus, and the Suez Crisis. The Navy always put Mary Jean where history was being made, and Mary Jean managed to make history. In 1958, she went to the Recruit Training Command for Women at Bainbridge, Maryland, where she was staff administrator. She had approximately 2,400 waived recruits annually and a military staff of 50 enlisted women and 6 women officers. She was chosen for Officers Candidate School, Newport, Rhode Island. I think her rank at that time was Lieutenant Commander, junior grade, Lieutenant junior grade. Her first duty as an officer was Norfolk, Virginia, where she was in charge of Communications Center for the entire NATO staff. She was stationed again at Pearl Harbor as Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications specifically, and it was during that time that the atom bomb was tested on Bikini. Hawaii was a relay point, and she was on watch when it happened, and Washington expected the word in 3 seconds. I do not doubt for a minute that she met the deadline. I asked what we civilians call a job review. She was ranked on 16 qualities, and her superior officer gave her the highest possible rank on all 16, is not exceeded. He also stated that she was eminently qualified and deserved to be promoted above others. She was promoted to full commander, United States Navy. An article written about her in the San Diego Union in 1972 states that there are few Mustangs among women who've made the Navy their career, but Mary Jean was one. She managed to work her way from apprentice seaman all the way to full commander, United States Navy. She was a woman in a man's world, and we have pictures to prove that. Mary Jean says in that same article that she would not take $1 million for 5 minutes of her time in the Navy. The medals she earned during her career are on displays. They include, among others, the Navy Commendation Medal, the Navy Defense Service Medal with Bronze Star, Good Conduct Medal with 4 Bronze Stars, American Campaign World War II, American Victory, and you might want to show the Meritorious Service Medal. This medal is given for outstanding non-combat meritorious achievement for the United States of America. She did what to me was an astonishing thing. She somehow talked her mother, Mrs. Walter Birch from Inman, Georgia, into moving to San Diego with her when she retired. And she cared for her mother for the next 14 years. Will the Birch family please come forward?
Take a picture of the cemetery here a minute. Poinsettias have a little snow on top of them. This is Eva's monument. And this is Mary Jean. Mamas and daddies. And there's Jane. And this is Aunt Sadie's. Grandpa's. Grandmama Birch. Aunt Fannie Mae. The two infants. And we put flowers on the graves to Ida Tigner's mom and daddy. Let's take a picture of this from the other side. Ambrose W. Gray. And this is Sarah Kaya Gray. Oh yes, and this is the new flagpole and entrance they made to the cemetery down here. It has a pole across the way that keeps it lighted at night, so they don't have to take it down. It's up 24 hours a day.